Welcome to another episode. I'm just very happy and honored to have Daniel here. Daniel, is by now a very good friend and an important part in my life. And but it all started with us meeting in Paris in a complete different context, and then he was still running a company, was just finished his IPO before he wrote his book. And then at a certain time, I received that email where there, there was just, I think it was Daniel coaching or you at coaching or something like that. Or I don't know if you remember that exactly, but also without really knowing that you're coaching, I said, I'm in. And I think I became your first client, and then we started, working together in a coaching relationship, that evolved way further and became a strong friendship. And so I'm so happy and excited to have you here. But maybe you can recall the whole story, how that from your
So, Andy, thank you so much. Obviously, I echo everything you say. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, it was actually exactly like you say. So I sent out an email, and I think you answered so fast that I thought it was an out of office message, and didn't look at it in the beginning because I thought it's impossible that anybody had answered that fast. And basically, you said, "I'm in. I don't know what you're doing, but I like it, and let's meet." And yeah, and we met up, and the rest is history. And yeah, always obviously from my point of view and my side as well, was always fun to watch how you developed, what you did, and now off to new adventures, obviously with this one. So really excited to not only be part of your personal life, but also of your professional life, obviously.
in every company. That's the magic.
It is.
True. So no, it was, and I think why it's such a gift to have you is because I think as a young founder, as an entrepreneur, right? At least from my experience, what I realized is that you, you have a constant shift of expectation, and not only from the outside, but also from the inside, because you grow personally. And so I feel like I had this always the thinking about every financing round, or let's say even every half a year, my role description, what that CEO thing means, completely shifted, right? Because one time you have to focus on customer, then you have to focus on fundraising. And so which takes different skills. Some of them are similar, but also, and overall, what I think where I had the biggest part of my own growth experience with you is really like first aligning my inner self to what I truly wanted, not what I said I wanted, but and what I truly wanted and needed, and then also develop my leadership skills, because I think as you start a company, you always have that thing. You start with your friends, your old buddies, and then at a certain time, structures evolve, and you need structures to be able to grow. And then in the beginning, you're managing individual contributors, and then you manage managers, and it just takes a complete different skill set. But maybe what would be interesting for me also in this reflection, when you start, uh, before we go to your own journey, but when you start it with me and with other young founders that you help grow into that leadership roles, what does your normal process look like?
Actually listening, really listening. When I did my coaching training, we learned a pretty I find impactful sentence, which is you listen to understand and you don't listen to answer. And I think in our societies, we basically, whenever we listen, we start to formulate an answer already because, yeah, we know what he's going to say. And if you start going like that into a coaching session, you won't really hear the important things. So I really don't have any expectations as such. I really believe that understanding the person, listening to the person, and giving the person the space that the person needs will figure itself almost out. And then the other thing is, and I think that's really important, I see people, like you said, as a whole. I think we have professional parts and we have personal parts and we have some hidden parts, but you need to see them all in order to understand what you really need to achieve your goals in the end. And yeah, therefore, I think it's always really important to, in the beginning, really understand what's deep down below. And I don't know if you remember our first session, but you told me at one point, and you could tell that, you sit differently at one point when you feel, okay, somebody really wants to understand what's going on and not just the surface. Because obviously, what you guys all have in common is you're perfect in pitching. Yeah. And I could wake you up at 3 at night and you could tell me your story, but that's not necessarily the story I need to know. I need to know your real story. And I think that's really the difference in the beginning, especially.
How do you help people to, because also some listeners are earlier in their in their career, in their stage, how or in a complete different context, how do you figure out what is the inner story, like the real story?
Um, well, I think you get to know. Well, first of all, I've been in their shoes, right? So I do know what it feels like, and I think that really helps me. And you pretty soon have a connection. And sometimes I also just drop some of the things that I felt, so they feel okay. I'm safe here, and he knows what I'm talking about, and then they open up more. But often they don't even know exactly what it is. So often people come to me and say, I want to be coach for ABC. And then they go out and actually it's G, H, and Z because it's completely different things. And they figure that out along the journey. And that really helps. And it's completely fine. So I think this moment of giving the space to think something through the entire way, and no matter how long it takes, and if it takes an hour for one thought, just give it the time to think it through entirely. Usually you will be ending up there at the place that you need to be, and also in the story that is really behind the scenes that you're trying to portray very often, right, in these professional contexts. So basically the answer would be just give it the space and the time, and maybe you know ask some questions that guide you a bit, and yeah, and then let it flow, go with the flow. I've never seen a session, especially in the beginning, where somebody said, I have no idea. I don't know what my story is. I don't know what I really want. Because otherwise, I would never force somebody to be coached, obviously. And I usually don't coach people where the board comes to me and say, you need to coach that person. The first question is always, do you want to be coached? And then why? And if you want to be coached and you have a reason for it, and even though you don't know the exact answer, you will open up.
That's super interesting. What when as as I know your story, and maybe you can tell a little bit about your background, just to give the readers that didn't read it a small glimpse. I um yeah, what motivated you afterwards to become a coach, and did you had coaches that inspired you? So just to give a little bit to give everybody a little bit of a background.
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe let's just give you a bit more background so that I can put that in a context. I started in the corporate context, so worked for the second largest mobility company in the world at times, Deutsche Bahn. Yeah, always a quite interesting when you told that story at a party. Nobody cared. That was really interesting. I think today it's even more complicated to say that you worked there, but I absolutely loved it. And I invented different stories. Yeah? I was a driver. I was a conductor. You name it. Pretty funny things that came out of that discussion. So I really loved it there. It was an important part of my career, and I ended up being the CEO for Western Europe, which was great. So I was sent to Paris, and I planned to stay 3 or 4 years. Then I fell in love over there to my wife. Now we're married, and then a startup came up who pretty much did the same thing as we did at times, so trying to harmonize ticketing. And so they asked me to join because two of the three founders said, we're going to leave the business and we need somebody to actually manage the business, because unlike you, they didn't feel that they wanted to shift into that role of management, which is really fair, right? It's not for everybody. And sometimes you can stand in the way of the success of your own company, right? And you need to appreciate that. So I spoke to them, and there were 20-ish people at times. So I changed then from a 350,000 people to a 20 people company, which was quite exciting. And I had a lot of calls from within DB, from external, say, Daniel, you're ruining your career. It's the worst step you could ever make. All these people then called me 6 years later to congratulate me. So you know how these things go, right? In German, we say fathers and mothers. Oh no, success has a lot of fathers and mothers. I think this is how we say it in German, and I think it's quite nails it. And then we were acquired when we were 150 people, so did the B series, and then we were acquired by Trainline. And like I said earlier, we were 1,000 people in the end and IPO'd in 2019. And just before we IPO'd, so that was roughly a year before I left Trainline, I asked myself, what you going to do next? Because the IPO was then it was clear to me that at one point I wanted to leave because my story was written. And I really asked myself, what is the thing that motivates me most in my job? And it was really seeing others achieve their objectives. As I was never one of those managers who said, yeah, they did something, but give me your presentation, I'm going to show it. No, I wanted them to show it. And when I got home and I thought about what made out a good day, so I kind of tried to look at that for a couple of weeks to see what was the element and what is the connection between the things that really make out a good day for me. And it was really when people surprised me and had great ideas and overachieved themselves with whatever it was. Yeah, but still having great values and all that kind of stuff. And then I realized, well, that's actually coaching. So I realized my style that worked at work was coaching. And then, like, because you asked, I had 3 times amazing coaches, absolutely amazing coaches. I couldn't have done the steps without them. Yeah? So, for example, I was a CEO for the first time when I was 29. Imagine that without coaching. Yeah, I would have been burned out after 3 months, probably. And no, that was really an important part of my life. And then I thought, okay, I could start coaching just like that, or I do another training. And then I chose to do a coaching training because maybe that's important. Coaching as such is thought to be completely non-directive. Yeah, so it's basically only asking questions. And I sometimes don't like that about coaching because sometimes you do have an idea. Yeah, so I wanted to go to a coaching school where that is appreciated. So it's a coaching school in London, Mailer Campbell, which really looks at coaching from former executives for executives, because it's, first of all, it's a different pace sometimes. And also when I have something to contribute, because I've seen it myself, I don't impose it, but I say, well, look, yeah, you might remember that from some sessions. I've seen ABC. Are you interested? And then we share that. And then obviously you can still go away and say, I'll take this part, but I don't take that part. But as such, it is not non-directive only, yeah, but it's a good combination. And then I did that training for a year, and then I started coaching. And maybe just to conclude, because at one point after 3 years, I realized that I was missing a bit of my own project. And obviously, my idea of coaching is that after 6 months, at least you take a break, so that coaching or that the coachees don't become, let's say, dependent on the coaches when it comes to time to think. Yeah, so I usually I'll go out. And then I realized after a few months that I'm missing a bit of my own project. Yeah? And that's when I started taking some of the board director roles. And now I'm a chairman in 2 companies to have my own project, but still always in the non-directive view, which is great.
And you wrote a book.
And I wrote a book. And I wrote a book, but that was mostly because, first of all, it helps, yeah, to be clear. I mean, you write a lot, yeah, for yourself. You always have, and it's really good to get clarity for yourself. And also because I got the same questions a million times, and it's just easy to say, well, here's the answer.
This, this was very, very important and also interesting background, because I believe that the investment in in coaching is often seen when I speak to founders. First of all, something they're unsure about, right? I don't know if you have experienced that, but I think ultimately for me, it's like the best investment that you can do, right? Because it's the investment in your own growth. And even though, and I know in the beginning, I was always like, I don't know if I have time for coaching. There's another good phrase, which and I think one of the biggest disbeliefs, because ultimately, you give this time just to grow and to reflect, and I think that will create the leverage that you need, right? Because the company, especially nowadays, right, in the new way of AI native built companies, where everything is so much faster, even, is I think the clarity is one of the most important factors that you can have. If you don't have clarity, because if you know what you want, you can build it very quickly. You you can create things very, very quickly. But I think it needs that inner clarity. So what are the in your experience, what are the other big leverages, besides for sure getting a coach, that help people to derive inner clarity?
Well, I think first of all, what's important is if it's coaching or mentoring, we can go into your question in a second. I think the most important thing is to understand the investment of time will net give you time back. You just spoke about clarity, and I think it's so important. So to me, I would say the second most important thing, if not the most important thing, because coaching can help you to get there, is to take time to think, to really create a space where you take time every week to ask yourself, what are the most important things that you want to work on? Be it on a personal level, be it on a professional level, and then kind of almost sense check that with reality. And I did that every Friday afternoon because it helped me to just clear my mind for the weekend and have clarity to what to start with on Monday. And often in the beginning, it was pretty frustrating because I realized actually I wasn't working on what I wanted to work on or what I thought would add most value, but what my agenda told me to work on. So others pretty much dictated what I should be working on. And that's not the role of a CEO, as you know well. Yeah, so I think that sense of clarity and to make sure that there is more to it, right? There's not only to put that in your agenda, there's also where do you do it? How do you do it? Yeah. So for example, to me, it didn't work in my office. So I had a different room where I knew it's fine. Then, for example, what didn't work for me was to do it in a digital way because I didn't remember what I wrote. Then I took a piece of paper. Then a piece of paper that had lines on me was already too much. It was already too full to me. So I took an empty, I always remember I went by the printer, took out a piece of paper, had my always the same pen, went into that room, always the same moment. I think I always had a half of a chocolate. I'm a bit of a chocolate guy. And then I sat there and I did that exercise. And I always knew in the beginning it was a bit frustrating and it took me more than an hour. In the end, it took me 10 minutes because I was so clear with myself. I knew exactly how I was doing that exercise. Yeah. So I think that's one. The second thing is, and I think that's a bit underestimated, is mentors. Yeah, I mean, you have a coach to whom you speak regularly and who accompanies you. That's the way that I see myself. Yeah, it's a companyship, and it's creating a safe space and a thinking partnership. But a mentor to me is somebody with whom, and I know that you have great mentors, right? And you have developed that over years, yeah, or sometimes over a decade now. And you're great in keeping relationships because this is really about having relationships. And my mentors I have for gosh, and then everybody knows that I'm old, but for 25 plus years. And just like yourself, I have invested a lot. But the great thing is you can just call them up whenever and you can drop pretty much every question. For example, when I went to Paris at times, I called my mentor and I said, How do you feel about that? And, she asked two questions, said two sentences, and I knew exactly that this was the right thing to do. Yeah, so mentoring is completely underestimated. And maybe one thing to add, because I get a lot of questions, how do you find mentors? You will be surprised how many people are very happy to mentor. It's just you need to reach out to them. And then you need to, yeah, to almost nourish that relationship. You need to call them, you say, let's go for coffee, because these are usually busy people, right? But you will be really positively surprised how many people are very, very happy to mentor. And I have a lot of mentees myself, just like yourself, right? And a third thing is, I don't know how to put that in a general context, but is your purpose your maybe let's call it a personal life. So how to recharge your batteries, how you get your energy, and where you get it from, and that's the people, that's the thing you love, and that is as important. Because if all that is intact and is in place, it is very hard to derail you from a professional perspective. And I mean, we have both been through that, right? We know what the roller coaster feels like. And if you don't have that, then it is really tricky. And it can be, and I mean, you know what I'm talking about, it can be really dangerous. It's completely underestimated. So having I always call that a team on your own, is not only a necessity, it's almost crucial to survive. Yeah? And I always say you don't have to be alone in that. Because what you said earlier is quite interesting. You said coaching today is a bit more accepted. In the beginning, it was almost seen as a weakness. So if you had to see a coach, it is something like, oh, I have a failure, and like psychology at times, yeah, or seeing a psychiatrist. It is, and that's good. But it is important to understand that you don't have to be alone in that, and actually you can't be alone in that.
Hmm. I think that's such an interesting one. So it's like back at time was when you got something in your performance review or your board wasn't happy with you, then you're just like, oh, he should better see a coach. It's like coaching. So as a form of punishment, even though it comes from the right, from the right place of thought, but I'm 100% in agreement with you that ultimately you need to choose what's you need to choose it for yourself, because it's a choice, it's of self-investment, and it needs an inner acceptance. I think you mentioned a couple of very wonderful things that I think I can just echo on the mentorship side. I think also advisors or mentors in businesses are just, I would say, existential, because they are your sounding board that is kind of independent and has only one intention, and it's your success. And it's not financially driven. It's just pure. And I think it's a like a yeah, it is. It's an investment that's so worth it. In my case, I've seen that working out very well. I've seen that in other cases working out very, very well. But I want to just dive a little bit deeper in the other thing that you said, which was that you started today with, there's this professional life and then there's the private life, right, which is ultimately one life, where your relationships play such a crucial role. How do you, like, for yourself, how do you structure your family life? I know you're a proud father. How do you structure like parenting, relationship, professional career, um in like and also yourself, right, in terms of the time that you need for yourself, for your health, for sports or nature exposure, what all the things that you do. Do you have like a playbook or a own structure, or do you play it week by week? How do you approach it?
Actually, I do have a structure. Well, first of all, I'm in the luxurious position to be able to choose, right? So sometimes I think one needs to be, and I mean, you're in the same position, we need to be careful to not sound arrogant in the sense of telling everybody how to do that, because if you have to work 50 hours to survive, from a monetary standpoint, then it is very easy to say, right? So I think that's important to just mention that. The way that I structure my day is pretty much always the same. So I get up at 7 roughly in the morning. Then, spend a bit of time with my son, sometimes bring him to kindergarten, and then I start working. Yeah, so I really love working because I'm in the absolutely amazing position to only work with people and on topics that I love. Obviously, yeah, stuff comes up and people are not in a good mood. Yeah, we're all humans. That's completely fine. But that's really kind of um, the prerequisite for me to only be working with people that I really appreciate working with, so that I know I look forward to spending time with them. Yeah? And not only in coaching is that important, but also in the chairman context. And also, obviously, I'm doing some business angel activities. I mean, we spoke about that. So it's that's what I'm doing from, let's say, 8 to 12, and then I cook. Yeah, I love cooking. That is to me the most relaxing thing in the world, actually, even grocery shopping. And you know why that is? Because for 15 years, I couldn't do that. I just couldn't do that. Yeah, so just to have the luxury to cook a good meal, and the energy after, right? After you ate a great meal and taking the time, and not to just, for 15 years, whenever there was food on the table, no matter where, I just ate it because you didn't know when you were going to get food for another time, right? So horrible, not only for the body, but also for your mind then, consequently. And then usually I'm taking a nap. Yeah, I mean, we could have hours on discussion, which I did like 2 hours ago, hours of discussion. Because in Japan, 15 years ago, or I think even longer, they introduced mattresses all over, because it is proven that if you sleep for 20 minutes, it gives you 3 hours, up to 3 hours of productivity back. Yeah, and I actually tried that in a few of the business that I was. So I introduced rooms with mattresses, but nobody dared to do that because it's just not in our mentality, which is, from my point of view, completely stupid, right? Don't sleep longer than 20 minutes because then you get in the REM, so in the deep sleep phase. Then you need to sleep 1.5 hours. But if you sleep 20 minutes, it's like a completely new day. And then I do some sports, and then I spend time with my son whenever I can in the afternoon. Now he's at an age, I told you that the last time, that he sometimes says, well, I'm not interested in playing with you anymore. Well, I hope, that's going to not always be like that. Yeah, and then usually we eat dinner quite early because here in the north of Germany, it's, unless it's summer, it gets dark quite early. And then I spend the evening with my wife and with friends. And that's ideally how most of the time my jobs look like. Sometimes, obviously, I travel. Yeah, I have a few clients in Paris and London just due to my history, and in Munich, and yeah, in some other parts of the world. But usually, I would say 80% of the time, that's kind of what I structure my day like. And you asked about energy, right? In the end, I don't believe in work-life time or work-life balance or that kind of stuff because to me, it just doesn't make sense. If you work and you love what you're doing, you don't consider it giving away energy. To the opposite, you will actually get energy. Yeah? So I always compare that with a battery. Yeah? Let's take the battery of your phone. There are things that takes away energy and there are things that provide you with energy. And you need to figure out to balance that, obviously, in a way that you're way positive in the end. Yeah? And I think I have a pretty good feeling because now I have time to watch out for myself and to listen to myself. And if you do that, just like yourself, right, when you're getting stressed and you get a good feeling for you if something's going on. And ideally, to be honest, even though I love what I'm doing and I'm really caring about my coaches, and about my let's say my C-level in the groups that I chair, but I sleep really, really well, and I'm not worried about stuff. So no, it's really, I'm living the life. I'm good.
Amen. So when what is the that's beautiful to hear. So you're literally working basically 4 hours in average a
Yeah.
day, or
Yeah.
it's a it's like there's a book. It's called the 4 Hours Work Week or something, that where somebody claimed. I'm sure.
For me, it's a work day, right? But still,
Yeah, yes, I know. It's like I was like, there's somebody who takes it even further. But I think when you're building this a startup, I think there is a certain, definitely. I mean, as you said, the 50 hours was probably. Would you say 50 hours was your former reality?
no,
Um,
more,
much more.
much more. I would say it was between when you IPO, you work nonstop, right? I would say in the end, it was definitely 60. I think tops 70 plus. And I would say, an average over the last 15 years, until I stopped in Trainline, it was, yeah, probably 60 hours easily.
And then when you think of when you think about your normal client, like who is a executive, often startup founders, and or the people you invest in, would you say what is their average?
Mm, it really depends a bit on the stage that they are in, and then there are phases. I mean, you know that better than anybody else. When you fundraise, you cannot say I'm stopping at 40 hours, right? It's just you have a time frame, and that needs to be matched, and sometimes it's a lot. I would say, in average, it's gotten a bit better. Um, I would say it's probably more around 50-ish hours, but it's still a lot, and especially in the beginning. And you said earlier, I really love that, and you know that I did some graphs around that for myself. The difference between, let's say, a founder and then a founder who gets into that leadership CEO role is that in the beginning, work is measured more quantitative. So I hear often, if I come home and it didn't hurt, then I feel like I didn't work. Yeah, so being disruptive also implies just working a lot, a lot, a lot, and it's basically their life. Whereas at one point, if you have a superstar team, and ideally everybody whom you hire should be better, than yourself in their field of specialties, then it's more about managing them and providing a framework. And then it's more about qualitative outputs. And therefore, it doesn't have to be as much or as many hours invested. It's more about the output and the impact that it has. Yeah. So ideally, I try to look at their schedules with them. And also, by the way, write a new job description, like you said earlier, because their job entirely changed and sometimes they haven't realized. And then often they realize that it's not so much about the hours they work, it's more about what they work on. And ideally, work more on the team than in the team and all that kind of stuff. So I would say when I start coaching with them, they probably work up to 60 and afterwards probably around 50 hours. I mean, that you have to work a lot as a CEO is a no-brainer, right? And then there will be times when you have to fundraise or prepare an exit or whatever it is, where it's much more. But in average, if you manage to work 10 hours productively a day, that is more than enough. Should be more than enough.
Do you have a principle around when you coach people, and or do you see a recurring pattern with people about how much like time or like weekend blockers, vacations, all their things, how do you treat them? Because I was the guy, like, just to give the background at the beginning. It's like I was the guy. It's like we never took vacation, right? That we don't have time for vacation. We don't have time for weekends. And I have my own thoughts that I will reflect on later. But what are your personal, like? What do you see, and what is your personal recommendations?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that ours are pretty similar and probably have arisen from the same learnings, right? That's what we've done wrong. So that is, for example, one of the parts where I offer some advice rather than asking just questions, because often they have never seen that work well for them. I think that idea to say I'm not taking any weekends and any vacation is not helping neither the business nor themselves, because you lose clarity, you lose altitude, I would say, in terms of the level that you look at the business. And if you don't zoom out ever, you will just get lost in operations and don't see the most obvious things. And also, you will never recharge your batteries. And so my learning is take at least an extra day off. I always recommend Friday and Monday to a long weekend, every 6 weeks at least. And my personal learning is, but that's really personal, then everybody functions and is wired a bit differently, is that actually to me, having 3 days off entirely, um, to me is almost as much worth as, let's say, 2 or 3 weeks. I do need that once a year. Um, but as such, it's just important to at least have one day off a week, entirely off, not working at all, not thinking about work, and ideally every 6 weeks a long weekend. And to be honest, nobody can tell me that they can put that in their agenda. And what I'm always doing with my coaches regularly is to block that out for the entire year, to just sit down with their partners at home, because actually they are positively surprised. I always try to kind of bring the partners a bit on the journey with them to hold them accountable, and the other way around, obviously. And then just sit down and block out the agenda, and ideally book flights or book a train or book a hotel so that you can chicken out of that, because it's too easy to just,
Yeah, no, it's like this commitment. I do the same thing. As like I book non-refundable tickets. It needs to hurt to not do it, right?
exactly. So what's your view? What's your learning? What kind
No,
of
it's like I personally, I mean, I see, like I learned it from the very hard way, as you know, by from through the burnout. But I mean, right now I would see it. I would say everyone who is a founder or a like a high performer in a high performance job position, that can be high performance job. I don't mean it's like you need to earn a lot of money, but you can be in a stressful like job, and stress is, as we know, is something personal. But so taking that, you like a high performance athlete has active recovery times, because otherwise he would never stay in top of in top of his league. And so everybody who like I spoke to, and I learned it for myself, is that you need that recovery time. So I think also we even had this beautiful discussion in the team when people like take the like work on Sundays, right? Then you see it on the Monday. You see the people who took the time off. They come with a happy mood. They come with a brighter day. Like, let's go, a new week. And the other one's like, yeah, but I worked the whole week. And so you actually what you're taking. And so this what we just discussed in the team was you basically have a team rhythm. And if your team rhythm is Monday to Friday, you're fully present, right? And then maybe Saturday, small things, but it should be treated as an exception, right? Um, and then Sunday off, and then so no messages, nothing at all, because then you're all like, when you work on Sunday, nobody else works on Sunday. You bombard everybody with messages, you throw them out of their recovery. They are like non-responsive. They can't be fully present with their family. The family gets angry. It's like you create a whole mix, right? Only because you can't manage yourself to the state that you take that time off. And I think for me, I mean, you know that I'm very like now maybe hyperly structured. So I book every like I make a commitment every Sunday for my sports that I'm going to do, or my movements, my like relationships. I have also, as you, a lunch blocker. Doesn't mean that I'm cooking every day, but I have a dinner blocker with my wife, just to ensure that it happens, right? Because I know the consequence of letting that slip. That it's, and I think that's the same thing as with nutrition. So it's just for me, because when I'm in the day, it's then I'm in the kind of in movement, right? But so this is why for me, taking the time to plan things ahead is really important. I also plan from board meetings to vacations to everything, always like as long like some even family events in 5 years, some people receive calendar invites, so that just happens. This because then I give myself an own commitment. For me, putting something in a calendar and adding somebody is kind of creating commitment, and I think this is the same. Yeah, and then also the reflection. For me, reflection on the weekend is a core principle, because I feel so this creates that refocus, right? What did I wanted to do? Like, what was my focus? What did I actually do? And without doing that, I realized that I think, yeah, it was a good week, but I need to give my mind even that peace to say, hey, you planned this, you actually did all of that, and it creates for me satisfaction just by going through that process. Takes 5 minutes, but it's and just going through each and every day's calendar is like, wow, actually this week was a lot. And so why? Because that inner part in myself that always wanted to do more, right, gains peace. Because and I think this is and I think we need to, everybody needs to learn, like everybody's individual, but everybody needs to learn how what works for them. So and I think, yeah, and I think that's something I love, that every 6 week that Saturday to Monday. Um so a very, very good idea. But and then I think for vacation, for example, I have next week a vacation for 1 week. But it's not really 1 week, it's Tuesday to Sunday.
Okay.
I'm kind of looking forward to, yeah. So what I'm really looking forward to, and I think also, interestingly, from my phase from being in the company in no vacation to being in recovery, hardcore recovery mode for 2 years and 3 years, and then slowly doing things again, or in like when you're investing and or doing this, or like creative jobs, like all of that, were then there's no real team structure, right? I see so many people, also my friends, that are working actually that are never taking time off, because they live a very relaxing life apparently, but they're somehow always on because there's always something happening. So the differentiation becomes, in those creative jobs, I feel, even harder than in a normal corporate
It's very
corporate
fair. And
environment.
at one point, you consider everything work, and you
Yeah.
cannot appreciate the great things anymore. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Do you know that feeling, Andy, that when you just let it happen, and for example, you're 4 days off, yeah? So I predict that probably, so you're leaving on Thursday or maybe even Wednesday night. I believe that on Friday night or Saturday morning, you're going to have a great idea and something absolutely amazing will come to you just because you stop thinking about the business. But your subconscious obviously continues, and you had some questions that you didn't have time to answer, and you won't be able to answer them in the stress of everything. But getting away from it will give you so much clarity, so much new perspectives on the most obvious things where you say, unbelievable. I could have locked myself in a room for 3 days and wouldn't have figured that out. So people, once again, always come back to net energy and net investment. And I really believe that people do not appreciate enough that it's also for the business a huge benefit of stepping away from the business for a while and completely doing other stuff. You come back with a fresh view, clarity, and obviously, like you said, new energy, which you bring to the company as well.
Yep. So I take it extreme distance by Tuesday to Sunday. So I'm going
Okay.
to
Oh, yeah.
take no device, no device.
Oh, it's really?
So,
Wow. Well, that's awesome.
so that's my only thing.
That's really
It's like
Yeah, I'll
that-
take
if
a
it's like,
vacation. Yeah, sorry.
what do you do? And I think something that is so old school, and I hated it when I received one of those, is an out of office response.
Yeah.
But I now I like, for this one, I actually took it as like just that creates a boundary, right? And if something really happens, then you let the people directly know you won't respond, and this is the person you can contact.
Yeah. It's really important.
I've not seen the world going under in 6 days.
And
Because
if
we're so still
the
here.
total manage to reach you, that's the thing.
Yeah.
But it's a huge thing. I have often coaches who say, you know what, I'm just checking my mails. Yeah, if you're checking your mails, then it's not holidays. Because if you do that every single day, your mind will continue to think about it. And even worse, then you're somewhere at the end of the world and you can't do anything about it. So only look
And then you destroy your recovery. That's the same thing when you say, yeah, I'm just like just for me, the conscious practice of in the morning not checking my mails after I have like done everything for me, and I feel ready, then because then I'm ready to respond also from the right place, from the right energy. Otherwise I'm like just eating that inside me, and it eats me, and I'm somewhere then on that topic. And so yeah, that's
Do you remember when I pocket called you the other day in the middle of the night or something? And I thought about, did I wake him up? And then I thought, no, of course not, because he doesn't have his phone near his bed. And
no, and I don't have it on in the light. It's
yeah,
like,
exactly.
yeah, that was like I was like, so that's why I have no issues with I have no issues with pocket calls or
It was that's great news, so exciting, so that I, felt like I had to pocket that. No, it was just I was too excited. No, but this is really, really important, and people have to appreciate that. There is almost nothing more important. You can be the smartest person in the world, you can be the hardest working person in the world. If you're not taking that seriously enough, then the rest will not have the same impact.
Mm. When you coach somebody, and do they tell you if they have issues in their personal relation, in their family?
Often it comes up, and then obviously I also have to make sure that I draw the line, because I'm not a qualified psychologist, right, or psychiatrist. It's a completely different profession and has a completely different level. So what I'm always saying, it's good to know, and it is really good to know, so that we can find or try to find solutions around it. But I cannot solve, let's say, the issue that you have with your father on a psychological level, because then I would do damage, because I would completely, overstep borders. So if you ever come across a coach who doesn't have that training, and just, tries to cure you on that level, stop right away, because they will really do you harm and they're not serious. It's really important, because coaching, is so hyped. Unfortunately, you have a lot of charlatans out there who have no qualification at all, and who are not supervised, because obviously, I'm supervised as well all the time to make sure that I'm not, you know, doing any damage to anybody. And obviously, I'm also a human being, so it's really good, as to be spared. But yeah, this is really important. Yeah.
So it's like because I think when you're the topic of relationship becomes important in the manner is like when what I rather wanted, like where I wanted to take it, was the issue of time allocation, right? Because you always have more to do than you can as a founder, as an executive. So then giving the family the feeling at home that you don't have time, or or I think that's at least what I saw a lot. And I think this what you said, just taking some time to really let them know that they are important by, for example, pre-planning, right? Because structure, but also kids' time and stuff. Or how do you? Because I mean, then you have maybe your IPO, you do an IPO like you, or you're like make $1 billion, but then your children don't like you. So the question is, do you really do you consciously choose to the $1 billion, or the or loving relationship with your kids, or can you have both? Right, that's a big question.
Yeah. Well, I think you need to bring your partner on the journey with you. I could say, lucky enough that I didn't have a child when we IPO'd in that period, and also, we were just acquired before 3 years before that, etc. So, I mean, you know how that it never stops. But with my wife, we had a pretty clear commitment, because what is underestimated is that it does something to your mind when you constantly feel that you're in the wrong place and that you're not doing justice to anybody. So if you feel that your partner sits at home or your child sits at home and actually they expect something from you because you haven't communicated clearly what the commitment is in either way, then you're not doing justice to your board, your team, nor to your private life. And at one point, it will tear you apart. It will really literally tear you apart, because you will never feel in the right place, and you will never actually listen, for example, because you're always with your mind somewhere else. And that's really, really tough. And that's why these questions, that you mentioned earlier, and these personal relationships play a absolutely crucial role. To me, it's almost as important. It's almost as important. And for example, I don't know if you remember that, but in the 360s that I do in the beginning, I always almost insist to speak to somebody from the private life, yeah, be it the partner or be it somebody else. And I do that not to, I don't know, to learn uncomfortable things, but to sense check whether the way that the coachee believes they are communicating at home is actually happening. And this is not against them. I have only one goal, so that the coachee achieves their goals. That's my only goal. I have no hidden agenda. I have nothing in it other than making sure that they achieve their goals. But they need to know. It's really, really important how they are being perceived. And once they have understood that coaching, for example, is a great opportunity to take your partner on the journey with you and also to align on a few things, because ideally, most of the time actually happens between the sessions, yeah? And that is the time that you also spend with your partner. So this is probably the most valuable things. And relationships are relationships. You have some in your work environment and context, and most ideally you have in your private context. But you need to nourish them, and you need to make sure that they're being maintained and being taken care of and loved. And like you said, commitment is really, really important. And for example, I had one commitment with my wife at times. I will not miss any of the big events that we had scheduled. And I remember we had one wedding at times close to Prague, and I flew across the entire world to not miss that commitment, and I flew back the next day. So for my balance on ecological standpoint, it's a disaster, obviously. But for the commitment point, she knew she could count on me, and I promised her, no matter what happens, I'm going to be there, and I was always be there. Yeah, and therefore, it was really, we tried to go on that adventure together. And I, for example, when we decided to take that step, we said, really, we're going to take it together. And I couldn't have done that without her, because that support is almost as important. I mentioned that earlier when I spoke about coaching, mentor, the team around yourself, and then your purpose in your personal life. This is really, 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 really important.
Hmm. That's super, super, super interesting. I have another question because you mentioned that purpose, right? And you're mentioning you're in service of the coach's objective.
Absolutely.
And you also mentioned that you want to you always want to be done by 6 months, and I think that's actually something super healthy, right? Because I also figured out, and this is what you see also in a lot of the apps today, or like therapy apps, coaches and therapists. It's like that if the true intention isn't empowerment, right, then it's, and even like, because if you like somebody, then you like to continue working, right? But ultimately, true empowerment is if they really don't need you, or at least that. And I love that you put that boundary out as like, after 6 months, we take a break, and the best case would be you never come back. Besides as a friend, right? Not as a, but not in the same, not in the same role.
100%. And I mean, sometimes, if I take a look at myself, then next new position, next level, you might need somebody. But even then, I do recommend also sometimes change the coach, because a different coach can give you also a new perspective. This is not against me. This is for you. And obviously, it's very easy for a coach to make a coachee dependent on him. Then you have 3 clients for the rest of your life and you're done, right? But then you're thinking about yourself and not, like you said, I think you put it really nicely, of the empowerment of the coachee. And this is what it's all about.
And I think this, that the service perspective, when you is so important. So it's very clear what's your purpose now. But do you see people struggle with the topic of purpose a lot in those, like, is this a reason, and why people are struggling in their career on the path? Um, and how do you usually support them? What are the leading questions that one should ask himself?
Yeah. So I do see that. And I think that it also has to do a bit with how the world is being perceived. Yeah. It's being perceived as very chaotic, unpredictable, bad. I don't think it's true, by the way, in many ways. But
I'm on your side, 100% on your side.
yeah, but if you watch the news, it's a disaster. Yeah, we're all almost too close to extinction, and whatever. I think it's mostly to do with the fact that everything happens in real time. Yeah, I think that's really the only difference to what happened before. I'm not saying that there are strange and big things happening that are really negative. That's not at all what I'm saying. But as such, the world is not in a is not worse, in a bad place or anything like that. Anyways, all this to say, the mental charge for people, just in general, is so high that if you then on top have a very challenging job, with a lot of responsibility, and you know that the job of a CEO, I don't have to tell you that, is probably the most lonesome job in the world, because you're pretty much alone. You cannot talk to your team about stuff, sometimes not even your co-founders, not to the board. So you don't have anybody just on your team, right? And that's why it's so important to have, like we said earlier, a coach, a mentor, whomever on your team. So the purpose sometimes almost gets lost in that mental charge and mental load that you have by the world and your job. Yeah? And if you then have, let's say, your family, at one point you're more functioning than proactively asking, do you want to be here? Is that what you want to do? So questions I'm asking around that is often the exercise that I've done myself, what I said earlier. Note down for 10 days, what did this particular day make a good day for you? Do that just before you go to sleep, and don't think about it. It shouldn't take longer than 30 seconds. You write down just 3 words. Write them down on a piece of paper, and ideally on a piece of paper, not on a digital device, so that you can remember them. You know that thing, right? If you do your grocery list and you put it in writing, you can forget it. You will know everything in the grocery store. If you do it through Alexa or on your notes, you have no idea what you actually wrote down. So it does something to your brain. And then you do that for 10 days. And then you put them all next to each other and you ask yourself, what is the red dotted line between all those things? What do they have in common? Why am I here? And that really helps to ask yourself, or to allow yourself to ask, what is the purpose? Why am I here? What is it that drives me? What gives me pleasure? And what I can add in terms of value? And then we take that. That's usually what we do between the first and second session. Then we take that and then we do the reality check. So if this is what you like, is that what you're working on? And then, you can try to shift that a bit and try to make time for that. And in the end, it always helps the business. Yeah.
That's super interesting. On that note, when you think about the people, like CEOs and boards, is like, there is sometimes a time, right? Because the roles shift so much, the things you like shift so much. There's people who have a natural gift in finding joy and curiosity in whatever is in front of them, but that's not a given. Everybody's different. when like, do you feel there's a lot of cases out there where people actually realize, hey, wow, I really don't want to be the CEO. I really don't want to be the CX or CTO or whatever. That's just definitely not what like it was in the beginning what I wanted to do, but now it's such a the role description is like 180 degrees different. So
Yeah.
how
It does happen. It does happen.
mm,
I would say that 50% of the people who reach out to me to want to be coached, they are 100% sure, and it's more about the how to get there. Yeah, and that's why, when you do the job description and you have that reality check, which sometimes hurts a bit when you look at it and say, okay, it's not at all what I signed up for as a founder. And but still they want to grow into that role and they're really good at it. Then I would say out of the 50% remaining, I would say half of them, so 1/4 of all who say it's actually not for me. Now I'm really realizing, and actually I want to be a founder again, and I want to experience everything I've experienced in there again instead of going that next step. And then they install somebody else. Yeah, and often in that case, if you don't do it, if you know you're not the right person and you're not willing to transition into that role, then you might be standing in the way of the success of your own company, and that obviously can't happen. Yeah. So, um, yeah, therefore, I would say 1/4 is that, and then 1/4 is struggling a bit, but over time, making it into that role. But it costs them a lot of energy, and sometimes they then come back, let's say a year later, and they are still struggling. And then, I'm asking that question: are you sure this is what you want to do? And how can you get the best support? But over time, and I really hope that this is one of the main things that people take away from coaching, they don't have to be alone with that. And even if it's hard and you have your own, let's say, support system, it really changes everything because you just have a possibility to develop, to evolve, and to make sure that you, even in the worst times, you don't feel completely alone. But it does happen that you have people who say it's not for me, and I completely appreciate that. It's human, like you said. It's a new role. It's almost like you change the company and the role, and nobody asked you.
do you want that or don't you?
Yeah, exactly.
That is just, and also I think there's different phases of life, as you said. It's like when you did the IPO, you said like I was, yeah, like now you're blessed with your with your child, but at that point it might have not been perceived as the biggest blessing because it was
Very
already so much on the edge, right? And so I think everybody, but then it's also the question of what do you truly want, right? And so making that choice, do you want to be a father, a mother? Do you want to be like, or do you have to be everything at the same time? And then the question is, like, because I think if you open that box that usually you would never open of, am I still the right person for that? Or more coming from the inner question, as you said, from do I truly want that? And because ultimately you're in service of the company. And so if you're not in alignment with yourself, uh, and you don't actually want it, then you're actually probably more of a burden, at least in the maybe not in the short term, but at least in the mid or long term. So I think, and then just being open and say, hey, even playing the stoic principle of what would happen worst case if I go to the boards and I got it. And I can tell you from experience, the most important part is if you know it for yourself, right? And then you look for the conversation. The conversation is always so 10 times or 100 times more pleasant than you would predict it, because the biggest thing was your internal conversation, and your internal convincing was 10 times, 100 times harder than having the real conversation.
Very true.
Yeah, sorry, true. At least
But I think it's also
that
hard when you create your own business, right? To let go of your baby. I think that is probably the context which makes it harder. It's much easier. For example, I'm also coaching some, corporate CEOs, or also, let's say, people who get into CEO roles for the first time. And for them, it's a completely different question. They are employees of a company. Whereas, I mean, yeah, I don't have to tell you, when you become CEO, or when you really become CEO, yeah, of your own company, then it is a very, very different questions. And that makes it probably more complex because you ask yourself so many questions at the same time, just like you said. Not always easy. So I have a lot of respect for that, and it just helps me to have seen it from the other side to appreciate that complexity and to not pretend that it's just one thing. I think it's probably the most complex thing. The other complex thing that I've started to coach, which I absolutely love, is a takeover in family businesses. Absolutely loving it. Absolutely loving it. First of all, I think it's great that children still want to take over businesses from their children, from their parents, sorry. And then we talked about the separation of business and private life. But in that case, the private life sits on the table. Yeah, so you don't even have to ask the question. You just have to look around, and it's all right there. It's absolutely amazing. And
Oh, I didn't know that. That's amazing.